Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our study be full of vigor and illuminating all round. May we not unnecessarily quarrel with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Yesterday we spoke, those who attended, we spoke about, continue to speak about the purport and overview of the Upanishads. And since this is a Vedanta question and answer session, I'd ask you to be interactive, interject at any moment with any question or comment that you may have. And I'm assuming everybody can hear. So one question you might ask is, what is the basis of Vedanta? And particularly in a context of a seeming crisis everywhere, what is the practical use of it? As I said yesterday, 3 basic questions are being asked to stimulate the inquiry that we call Upanishads. Upanishads really and Vedanta are synonymous terms. That is a teaching to do with 3 basic concerns. Is there a root to anything? Is there something from which everything else comes? Some source, which is in some way a substance. The primary examples will be, if I see some object made from clay, if I inquire what is clay, then I know every object made from it. If I can see that there is no difference between gold and the ring, that if I see any object made from gold, I understand what gold is, and I also understand its malleability, that it can be molded and shaped into any particular form that can be separately identified, and a certain separate function that can go with it. So that's a basic inquiry. What is that? It is couched in the language of Kasmin no Bhagava Vijñate. What is that? By knowing which, we can know everything. And then the second thing is, what is the nature of myself in connection with all of that? How can I get to that original source that is within me? We can take the human entity as a sample of the entire cosmos, with material body being there, with a jumping mind that jumps from various subjects from one thing to another, somehow dissatisfied. That brings us to another question. Why is there pain? If we understand the source of everything, how can we now get around this experience of pain? We know it's a condition that everybody seems to experience. Indeed, every living creature seems to experience it. And then we can experience, particularly in today, this concern with death. Witnessing death and observing it all around. What is the nature of death? Is there something that gives us hope at the base, this root? Is it something to do with immortality in the face of mortality? These are the basic questions. So Vedanta attempts to answer these questions. It doesn't begin off with a speculation that I am standing here and I need rescuing. That can be a position, of course. All religions will take that basic position to start with. But if we talk of philosophical knowledge, then should we really let go of our common sense point of view? Because the answers to all of these questions lie in something that is profoundly different from our experience. And of course, all philosophic doctrines all their teachings are useful only if you're able to shift your position from the common day experience to something different. When a question is posed, then
and it might be relevant to what you're talking about, is that I would constantly become confused between subject and object. You know, when you talk of an entity and then we talk of spirit. I'm not sure if it really makes all that much difference, but it does cause me a lot of confusion, you know, between material and spirit. And it might be relevant to what you're talking about at the moment. So, but
the most fundamental discipline that we require, or the most fundamental approach that we require, is discernment. Yesterday, there was a devotee saying that they were studying the Viveka Shuddhamani of Adi Shankaracharya. The subject of discernment and discrimination seemed to be so important that a whole text was written on it. A crest jewel of discrimination that highlights the importance of this. So how do we discriminate then between, broadly speaking, subject and object? Now, when we look at the world outside, we're looking at it through 5 avenues, all restricted. Even when we look at a rainbow, we can see only 7 colors of the spectrum. There's an inference from science that there's an ultraviolet and an infrared going on as well, but we can't catch it. We require special instrumentation to catch it. But maybe other creatures can catch it. Certainly, in terms of subsonic sound, supersonic sound, there are creatures that can catch something that the human ear cannot catch. We don't have standard instruments like this. So what becomes our object or our objective world is different depending on the instrument that catches it. So there's a world out there, and how do we know it exists? It is a world that is unsettled, and as I said yesterday, one of the primary things that ancient philosophers understood and noticed very quickly was that this world is jagat. The technical world word meaning something that changes. And elsewhere, such as Katha Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, is compared to a tree, vriksha, something that can be cut down. So something that can be cut down is something that doesn't stay there forever. Unfortunately, ask people cutting trees in the Amazon forest. It'll affect us for many, many years to come, thousands of years to come. So we have to have a number of different positions to operate from. There's a common sense position which goes against any high philosophy. If you ask a carpenter, please make a table, these are the dimensions, it's no good him saying, look, I've studied this Vedanta philosophy, and the wood and so on and so forth, all of this is fleeting, all of this can be cut down, all of this comes under the category of the mutable, the changeable, and so I'm at a loss as to what to do. No, there's no point in telling a carpenter all of this is illusion or all of this is fleeting. It gives us certain dimensions, quality of wood and so on, and get the carpenter to make it. So we have to have the capacity to shift our position as we want, and Vedanta does this. It shifts it under 3 broad categories. The common objective world that we have of objects, things that we see, that is, things which we see, we hear, we touch, we taste, things which are all registered by the sense organs. But that would not be enough to solve the various problems that we have. There has to be some other tools in our toolbox. If somebody says to us that an atom is basically radiation, you know, when you explode the hydrogen atom bomb, you're left with radiation. You would never have suspected that matter contains this. So when we look at things, even objective things, further in greater detail, we find that the first thing that we caught goes away and yields to something more subtle and more vast. This radiation can be verified just by blasting the structure of an atom. But that doesn't prove that when the carpenter makes a table or a chair, we should speak in terms of radiation. That wouldn't make any sense. So when we are dealing with the sense-bound things and try to get some views about them, we have to follow the standards and norms of what we might call the waking world. And in the waking world, we have to have two things. We have to have an insight into it that is also an insight supported by another state of consciousness called dream and another state of consciousness called dreamless sleep. Bearing that in mind, we have to then operate according to waking world standards. Let's get our table made. So, if you're an honest person trying to lead a good life, the next question is then, if all of this is fleeting, why do I run into difficulties? And what is it that puts obstacles in my way? Or can I shift my point of view clear to avoid all the obstacles, to get around them? Is there a practical technique I can use to get around these obstacles? Is there another viewpoint that I can use that I wouldn't necessarily use in dealing with the standard things in the waking world? So the non-dualistic position is another position we can take. The non-dualistic position also uses a causal connection, but only for some areas of argument. So all the great philosophers will build up step by step, and at the last moment, it will take away the dualism. At the last moment, it takes away all the separate understanding of the objective world and present us only with a subject. Which means that when we eliminate, by process of discrimination, all the objective things, by virtue of a standard that says, whatever I see, is it fleeting? Is it changing? Does it have any permanence to it? And if I eliminate all that, what remains? Does the whole world vanish? If I take away space, all the objects within space disappears. If I take away time, then all the changes that I observe disappear. If I take away the total structure of space-time, and we have to bring these together because our modern science, that is to do with general relativity, special relativity starting there, says that actually what you see as a future event or a past event may not be a future or past event from somebody else's point of view. The Andromeda galaxy, so many million light years away, supposing there was somebody looking at our Milky Way galaxy from that point of view, moving toward us, our assessment might be not yet happened. Their assessment might be happened already. So that's the nature of shifting time. But we don't view it like that. We take that clock seriously. And yet, it's not exactly like that. It's our way of perceiving things. We have to have some way of dealing with the world. Now, if you view the world in a very different way, if you view it something like if you take it as a kind of game, as a kind of sport, this is the way philosophy takes it. Then things will change. I think I referred previously to a book, Imprisoned Splendor by Reynold Johnson, who was basically a physicist who studied all the psychological phenomena available way, way back, before anybody really started taking it seriously, before there were departments dedicated to the subject, investigating paranormal psychology and phenomena. So he was involved in chemistry, biology, and so on and so forth. Duke University, moved to Australia. But he, after doing all of his work in the imprisoned splendor, he comes to one conclusion. The only sense he can make of this world is that it's some kind of thing that conforms to the Oriental idea of lila, play. Now, if you take it in this way, then how does it relate to our experience of pain? How does it relate to our experience of the table and the chair? So when we examine things more closely, the finest and most tested and solid theory that we have in physics is to do with quantum world. I keep mentioning this because it brings up the whole subject of reality. This whole question of reality that the ancient philosophers and seers brought up. Things are not what they seem to be. This is something we've noticed. Next question, what is the solid thing that remains? What is that which is real? That is, what is that which shows no contradiction in our experience? Now imagine at the fundamental level, the real physics, the hardcore physics that we have, the most tried and tested, the one with the greatest, most accurate predictions within the scope of uncertainty still, but working out every time. And the reason why we are able to communicate by computer, or we are able to communicate through the various airwaves. The reason for this is because of this solid physics. And yet it's not the physics of the table and the chair, or doesn't seem to be. And yet it has to be. If it is the most fundamental physics, then we have to see it. We have to see it. You see, I'm standing here or sitting here, you're there, we see each other separately. But in the quantum world, what happens here, I as a person am present everywhere in my physicality. A wave system is present everywhere. It doesn't have to be located in one place. And it's not located in one place. It can simultaneously be present everywhere. It has no boundaries like that. Something that is a subatomic particle is not a thing in the sense of table and chair. It doesn't behave as things behave. It is some kind of vacillation, some kind of vibration in Hilbert space. That is, we can't really pin it down. It can be present equally everywhere. And furthermore, having become entangled somewhere, it has a holistic relationship everywhere. This is not the world that we experience. And so modern science is endorsing these things and highlighting the necessity for us to discern. Even though things do not look like the quantum world looks, we still have to take the fundamental physics seriously. In this same way, we also have to take the conclusions of the philosophers who are not just speaking from direct experience, but walking you through in a logical sequence. So in Shankaracharya's Viveka Shudamani, he starts his discrimination process off with the human body. That's where he starts. That's his starting point. He gives us a wonderful description of what the human body is. Now, if you have a romantic idea about the human body, please leave it off now. Because in 2 verses, he describes the gross physical body, understanding that there are other variations of body. There are echoes of this body. And so according to the Vedanta philosophy, this body is one of five. But let's take this body just for a starting point. And you see, how is it described? First of all, and I'm going to the second stanza that he puts here, he says, Aham mameti pratitam shariram. This body, the seat of delusion, what does it do? It expresses terms of I and mine. But is this I and is this mine in the category of object or subject? Is an interesting question. This is where confusion comes in. But it's the seat, the body is the seat of our delusion, because the body is registered I, mine, yet in the same breath we say my body. I say my shoe, my this, my that, my piece of cloth, my eyes. Well, who is the me behind it? So immediately we can see a discrepancy in our understanding, a mix-up of subject and object. So I'm not surprised that this confusion comes. Anyway, what is this body made from? Made from the same thing that everything else is made from. 5 fundamental elements in various combinations. But you see, not only is this the seat of the illusion, but he registers it in a physiological way. 7 ingredients are there. Let's see what it is. He starts off with marrow, something that is inside the bones. Bones themselves. Then there's fat. Some have more than others. Then there's flesh, including skin and all the rest of it. Blood. And the skin is the dermis, epidermis, all of that, all the different layers of skin. We can see it like constructing a tent. We start off with poles, and then we fill this in and fill that in. But a tent infers that there's some occupant. And then there are all the parts. Take your legs away. Supposing I fall down and break my leg irreparably, and they take me to the hospital. Oh, Swami, says the surgeon, shakes his head sadly. There's no hope for your leg. You may as well say goodbye to it. We'll cut it off tomorrow. So then I have a chat with my leg and say, oh, what a pity, never mind. The leg gets cut. And then I see it being removed in a bucket. Where are you taking my leg? No, don't worry about it. It's of no use to you now. We can't artificially attach it anymore. So it goes off. You can join a whole host of other parts, teeth and all the rest of it, to form a reception committee on the other side. All right, never mind. Still, what happened to the Swami? The Swami is still Swami. It's not that one part of the Swami left, one part of the body left. And yet, can you see, is an obvious thing that we keep repeating, but by the same token, we make the subject-object confusion because we didn't discriminate properly. And so Shankaracharya begins with this discrimination. You are not the body. On 2 counts. First of all, it is made from a number of elements. And secondly, it is made from parts. And something that is made from parts, an aggregate, will also fall apart. That's the nature of it. And the part is not the whole. A part in a car is not the totality of the car, but even the totality of the car is not the driver. So legs are mentioned, thighs are mentioned, various other parts of the body, chest, arms, back, Angaira, Angairu, Pangairu, and so on. All these various angles, all these various parts, all these various limbs, back, head, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. There's enough parts to be going on with. Now, modern physiology breaks it down even more. If we wanted to, we can. We can say that there are something like 700 trillion cells in the human body, and each one having some kind of potentiality within it. And the code name for it is DNA, containing all your potential, some over 700,000 coded messages, of which we only are using a few, mainly to hate somebody else, or kill somebody else, or survive, make the body survive, on this misunderstanding of subject-object integration. So the body is the seat of our delusion. Then what's the remedy? Well, the remedy really is to make sure that we don't make that mistake. All these forces, all these particular elements are gathered together in a particular sequence and they're modified into a human form. And the form has, for the large part, the most beautiful structure because it is fashioned in matter. And you see, there is this whole idea contained in the Prashna Upanishad that we've been studying, that we are made in the image and likeness of God, is a biblical quotation. That is another way of saying what happens here in this small area called man will happen in the great cosmos as well. The law of nature is constant, and sometimes we forget that. If the law of nature is constant, the whole of the universe is nothing more than quantum physics. And yet we're not experiencing it. We experience general relativity. This is the great headache for modern science, because they're also not able to scale up the ideas from the microcosm to the macrocosm and see what is the relationship. They seem to draw a line, which makes a great confusion. Two types of physics are there. General relativity that works very well in terms of curvature of space and time. And on the other side, something that never curves at all. One is determinate, the other is totally indeterminate. And philosophers will discuss these things at length for years to come. So there are 5 great elements which are there. I keep laboring this because once you understand that the whole of the subjective existence is a combination of these subtle elements called tanmatras. Once you understand that, then according to the great Vakra Samhita, you are immediately freed. Once you understand this, you're immediately freed. Once you understand that what looks to be objective dissolves when looked at properly. Now, what is the way of looking at it properly? It's not to bother about it on that side, but try to determine what is substantial, what is lasting. That would be the idea of it. So, having united with the parts of one other, these elements, they become gross. These elements, and I've drawn this before, I think I drew it last week, and I drew a kind of separation line. The separation line between the source of all the subtle elements from cosmic mind downwards, expressed as various energetic forces, and subtle elements, and then a line. But it's not really a solid line. It's a line of appearance. And we know that beyond that particular line, and science knows what it is, it's actually at the molecular level, then we start seeing things completely differently. We start making a mistake. Now, this is a wonderful description of what he called Maya. Maya, the fact that things are not what they seem to be and are interpreted as a result in a different way. So, having united the parts of one another, they become gross and become the cause for the formation of the gross body. Their subtle essence constitutes the sense objects. 5 in number, we know them, corresponded to sound and so on. All these 5 elements correspond essentially to all the senses that we have and their variations in every species. And it starts off with vibration. The whole of the thing starts off with a non-disturbed condition, an equilibrium, then an equilibrium, then an eruption, then a combination variation. And when we studied the Prajna Upanishad on Tuesday, we see the very fundamental diversification into two things, seemingly two things, described beautifully as the eater and the eaten, something that is eaten and something that eats. You examine anything in life, you'll find that there is basically everything is food. Supposing you take the energy from the sun, such a glorious thing, and all the heat from the sun comes because there's a force. There's another energy which is called potential energy, gravitational energy, something that squeezes hydrogen, which is electrical energy, together. That's what causes the heat in the sun. It's not fusion. Fusion just creates a bloating effect. It keeps things going. It's sustaining. And then that pushes and pushes and pushes. Millions and millions of years from now, we find that being thrown off as radiation. That radiation is caught by plants. Those plants catch it, and with the magic of photosynthesis, that is, making something, synthesis, making something from the sun's energy. Where do you come into the picture? Not at all at the moment. But from those leaves and so on, and taking all these other components that are blasted up by the stars, carbon, for example, and oxygen and all the rest of it, making carbohydrates, and you munch and crunch on these called potatoes, and you huff and puff on the oxygen that is given. And that comes into the digestive area, again, energy required to make energy and make a body. Making energy and matter, the same thing. And Einstein tells us, modern science, that energy is equivalent to matter. But the Prajna Upanishad declared it long back. Not only that, but many other Upanishads declared. But puts it not as matter, but as rai, food. And then what is eating it? Energy is eating it. And what's it producing? Food, energy. It's a cyclical thing. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, you can't say. Swami Vivekananda's language, you draw a circle with A, B, A, B, A, B, points on it, which comes first, A or B, it's impossible to tell. Same thing. So the whole thing comes under the heading of matter. And you can change the term if you like, it means the same thing. Just two aspects of the same thing, eternally producing that. And so this energy now coming out, and it's accompanying matter, combining, recombining, but not seeing, behaving like the quantum world. Just divine vibrations. Where else will they come from? Divine angels, divine graces, combining and recombining, and then condensing into the world that we see, which is only in the realm of a waking state. That's all. And so later on in this Viveka Shuddhamani, as part of this Viveka, as part of this exercise in discerning, brings in many other things. What things will it bring in? Well, it brings in all these aspects that we know of. It brings in discrimination, firstly, starting off with human body. Then it goes on to understanding what its composition is. But it's careful to note, it would be foolish for us to attach ourselves to anything that is changing or anything that is ephemeral. So, how will we progress? We have to adopt a certain liberating system. Understanding the impermanence of things is only one thing. On the other side of it, we have to understand the fullness that is being expressed. Otherwise, we're stuck with a very unsatisfactory concept of emptiness. And some philosophies put that out, but that would be equivalent to saying that nothing made everything from nothing. And that is actually a serious position that is taken by many, many scientific cosmologists. A 5-year-old child has the common sense not to accept it. You can't have nothing making everything from nothing. So the first step that Shankaracharya puts out is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, having gotten to a position where we can examine these questions, and when we can make a catalyst, we can accelerate our evolutionary process. Evolutionary process means that if our fundamental nature is this root that we call Brahman, with eternal possibilities when manifest, if that is our source, then how do we get back to it? First of all, if it is our source, it is our nature. And if it's our nature, we are not lost. We put it in religious terms. I want to find God. All right. I have to tell you one thing. What is it? He's not lost. There was no lost and found message that went out. God is missing. We send a search party. But this is a convenience language that we use when we consider ourselves to be in a conditioned and weakened form where all our solutions are found extracosmically outside ourselves. We have to look for the answer inside. And so the conclusion of the Upanishads is the same conclusion for all the Vedantists, and that is that Atman is in the beginning seen to be connected with this Brahman. Why would we say connected? Because for most people, the subject-object dilemma is still there. And then we put ourselves into the subjective seeker position, thinking that there is an object to discover. In other words, we turn the whole thing back to front. Thinking that we are some kind of a seeker looking to fulfill ourselves and looking for answers extracosmically. It's not a bad starting position, but soon we'll realize it can't be like that. There's a connectedness that we find everywhere. We must at least be something like a spark of the divine. And then with a further inquiry, we come to not only a logical but experiential conclusion. There must be only one thing. These are not contradictory positions in Vedanta. These are things which facilitate our understanding. And having understood that, not denying any position, we use the carpenter position of table and chair when we want. We use the connectedness when we want. And when the oneness is there, everything else goes, disappears. Well, one thing that is required then in this whole exercise is we have to be true, thirsty entities. We have to have a thirst for this freedom. And Advaita Vedanta describes it as moksha, freedom. You may say salvation. You may say that it is an eternal condition, whatever language. But Advaita Vedanta will use the term liberation. Liberation from what? Liberation from this very confusion about the subject-object dilemma. I'm just going to break here because I see something in chat and having determined that this should be interactive. I realize I've been speaking all this time. So there's a question coming. So when you say things are not what they seem, do you mean like a ring in gold, or do you mean like snake and rope? In the first case, it is still correct to say that it is a ring, but we need to go deeper to realize it is gold. And in the later case, it is not correct to say that it was a snake, it was a rope, or it is like a dream which exists momentarily, but is found to be not true when you wake up. Okay. Well, you're making this as a statement rather than a question, is it? So the answer is yes to all of those points. But let's take this one, interrupt the flow of things, just to take things one by one for ensuring understanding. Things are not what they seem. Yes. Do you mean like a ring and gold? Yes. When we make the mistake of taking the individual entities and not seeing the substance of it, we think that a ring is separate. That's the mistake that we make. And in this regard, we're also making a superposition as well, or a superimposition as well. We are superimposing something which is a resemblance of what is there. It's not that, in the example of a snake and a rope, for those unfamiliar, in the twilight of my day, I see some coiled object, and immediately I jump to a conclusion. That conclusion is, it is a snake and snakes are dangerous. Or we have to handle the snake, either by confronting it, or by standing poised, mesmerized, or by withdrawing or running away from it. But the next option would be, try to find out and verify, is it in fact a snake? And that will require knowledge, and knowledge requires purity of mind. And purity of mind requires also a basis for it, which says that I should discern between good moral behavior and bad moral behavior. Something that is substantial and something that is not. Something that is truly satisfying and something that is not. Something that is preferable versus something that is pleasurable. And this kind of discernment has to be ongoing continuously, regardless of the approach you take. Now, the easiest way of doing this would be love of God. And the Vedanta philosophy doesn't relegate it to the backwaters. It says, take this in this day and age as your primary tool. Make a love of God. And in doing that, take on an appreciation of this series of waves, and you would take it some kind of God's play of love with you. In the Bhagavatam, Sri Krishna makes it clear to Uddhava, this is not a cruel joke on you. I am playing this game on myself because there's only one entity there. Now, as soon as we see this diversification and see different entities, we've now made our mistakes. Because we put ourselves in an individual position, and against that, we see all the diversification. We don't see a unity. But once we understand the principle of it, we can work on catching it up with the practice. So when we investigate this coiled up thing properly, we see that we ourselves projected this image of snake on the basis of the resemblance that it has to a rope. Because when we see it properly, we see a rope. And the rope was hidden to us, and the snake was projected to us. And a pure mind, that is a mind full of knowledge, purified with knowledge, that sattvic mind will have this revealed to it. The first thing then is we have to have a will and a desire and a thirst for it. And Shankaracharya is very keen, not only in the Viveka Shudamani, but other places also, to make this great distinction that a student has to have 4 basic qualifications. They at least have to have sufficient knowledge to make a discerning approach to things. This is also laid out in the 6th stanza of the same Viveka Shudamani. seen to be so important that it is not just a jewel, it is a crest jewel. We go to the 6th stanza there that he puts out. He tells us what will not get us this liberation. He says, let people quote the scriptures. He's assuming that the student would have studied the scriptures and sacrifice to all these subtle elements, all the illuminating factor translated as gods. He's assuming that ritualistic worship is also being practiced. Let them perform rituals and worship all these God and all the manifestations and attributes of God, seen to be deities. But there's no freedom, there's no liberation without the realization of what? Of one's identity with the internal subject that we call Atman. That's the subject. Not even in the lifetime of 100 Brahmas put together. Now that's something like 311,040 trillion years of human calculation. In other words, the chances are very slim because these are not the means to doing it. Now, these are means, these are avenues to discover this if there is no egoistic motive behind it. That's the point. So even in the whole subject of karma yoga, he discusses this in the 10th stanza also, saying that let the wise and erudite man, meaning person, having commenced the practice of this realization of the Atman, give up all works, but by works, Shankaracharya means self-centered works, selfish works. Karma yoga is doing unselfish works with no motive whatsoever, and try to cut loose the bonds of birth and death. That's the point. When we talk about liberation, we're talking about freedom from this tie into ignorance, this enslavement to the senses and enslavement to the objects of the senses, which is our common world. Work leads to purification of the mind, but not to the perception of the reality. The perception is done in a different way. It is just to clarify our vision. The realization of truth is brought about by what? By this important subject of discrimination. That is, when we've understood this is real, aha. Just as when we see the rope, that's the reality. But the process of going to find it out is equivalent to all these other approaches. I have to go and find a lamp. I have to take the lamp. Maybe I have to take a teacher with me. Maybe the teacher himself will reveal it to me. Maybe I ask the teacher, please, can you show me with your lamp? And so for that reason, from the very start, qualifications for student and teacher are laid out from the start. So it's done by this discrimination and not in the least by 10 millions of acts done from a selfish point of view. So the next part of the question, in the first case, that is the gold in the ring, it is still correct to say that it is a ring. Yes, it is a form of a ring. But if we identify with it, now let's personalize it. You say to the ring, who are you? And it makes this mistake. It will say, I'm a ring. A wiser person says, no, I think you are gold in the form of a ring. And the ring being by being under ignorance will say, no, I'm a ring. So this is the point where discrimination has to come in, discernment has to come in. In the latter case, that is of the gold, it is not correct to say, the example of the snake. It is not correct to say that it was a snake. No, it is correct to say, from a point of view of knowledge, even having discovered the rope, it appeared to be a snake, is the language. Because that language reflects what is now revealed. It appeared to be a snake. We can't deny the appearance of it. Now, it didn't appear as anything else. It appeared as something that it resembles. That means that when we look at the world, we are seeing evidence of the reality. And the evidence is everywhere. Very often, an agnostic atheist will say, show me evidence of God, put in that language, expecting that God can be put in a test tube to see is it acid or alkaline, made objective, instead of the eternal subject. It's a nonsense question. It is assumed that God is an extra cosmic thing that can be examined, and this subject-object thing is mixed up. I often give the favorite example of this mix-up by saying the Swami is fond of bananas. The Swami ate 2 bananas. When will the bananas eat the Swami? A complete confusion of subject-object. So it's the same thing. So now we come to a conclusion that the evidence is before us. The evidence is before us because when we look at the whole universe, we are seeing a seemingly conditioned thing that holds our ignorance up. There's a reason why the electrical energy that is in the form of an electron doesn't fall into the proton. It doesn't fall in there because there's an uncertainty principle that keeps it away. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It's a principle that says there is something called Maya, and we can never be certain about it. The equation goes that delta x, and then time, and in relation to delta mv, that is the velocity of a particle, or the momentum, really, momentum of the particle, can never be less than a certain amount. That's all. And in between, a tremendous uncertainty. We don't know what's there. We don't know where it is. We only know the probability of where it is. That's all. It's one of the equations of Maya, if you want to take it like that things are not quite what they seem to be. But the evidence is there. The evidence that what is keeping up, what is sustaining the duality, and what is sustaining the plurality are these forces that appear and are actually evidences of what is undivided and what is unchanging and what is infinite. So now we come on now to the next part. Or is it like a dream which exists momentarily but is found to be not true when you wake up? Yes, that also. Because if it is all a kind of play, a kind of drama, and if our normal, so-called normal waking state is endorsed as reality, only by examining these 3 states, and in that same book, Shankaracharya does it too, is one of the subject matters is to examine these 3 states. And so he does it after going through very carefully, almost a synopsis of the various positions contained in the Upanishads, in this beautiful text of over 500 verses. So he highlights these various positions that we can take. Now, the waking state will yield to a dream state. And the dream state will yield to a state where no experience takes place, no duality takes place. Only a sense of objective peace is there and recalled by a subject that observes it. And that is able, therefore, to review it and to recollect it. Now, when all of this is gone, what remains? Well, what remains is the knowledge, the knower. And when the knower understands that they are the knower, it is knowledge. And from this point of view, it is an awakening. And the language is used. The awakened one, the one of awakened intellect, is the Buddha, the one of enlightened buddhi. So we use this language of awakening. And so it's exactly like that. You know, when you awake, then the whole thing disappears. When we wake up, our dream has gone. And when we dream, our waking state is gone. And when we go into a deep sleep, both waking and dream are gone. Now, how do we catch these ideas from a practical point of view? To understand the various locations near to us. The nearest location is our body. And Shankaracharya goes on to mention also the mind. And like that, examines every possibility, every dimension of our so-called reality. And then by this process of discernment, comes to a conclusion. Now, supposing we have a method which is love of God, is there discerning factor going in there as well? Yes. Because when we develop a thirsting love for God, a yearning love, a pure devotion for a personal God, then our interest in the world goes away proportionately. The world is big, proportionate to our love for God being small. And when our love for God increases, our love for the world decreases. It becomes trivia. And we realize all along we have been involved in trivial pursuit. And so there is a natural discernment that takes place even in the path of devotion. Anyway, just to continue with the spirit, at least, of interaction. Any further observations or questions?
I have a question. It might be a bit slightly off topic, but when you said about, pursuing, once we find that love for God, everything else starts to, be small. There's some people I've observed in life that seem to be very neutral. So they don't crave the spiritual path as such. They're not in too much pain. What is their, I feel this might be for another week, but you know what I mean? Because you said at the beginning, so many people in pain and suffering, and that's sometimes what brings people into the spiritual path, or just the curiosity. So I've just often wondered about those people that sort of glide through life very satisfied. What is their almost karmic? I just wonder where they sit. I don't know if that makes sense, if you know what I'm trying to ask. I just wonder where they are. Were they spiritual in their previous path, or have they just not woken up yet? Do they, because they're not in any sort of pain, they've no curiosity, and they seem to be very content.
Well, I think you inserted a kind of answer into your question by saying seeming, because the people you're describing, I'll hazard a guess, are content as long as things are going well. I know lots of people who have been content prior to COVID. I know lots of people who happily spend their days, with no particular urge this way or that way. But you see, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, I always quote this, that success is speedy for the highly energetic. And it divides people as we divide food: hot, mild, and medium. So it depends. If your effort is medium, you'll get a medium result. But basically, all of us are going through life with a level of dissatisfaction. And if you ask those same people, are you fully satisfied? And they answer yes, it's only because their bank account is full or they don't have arthritis on the knee. But as soon as that comes in, they won't be content for long. So at 29, 30, they might be quite content with things, with the status quo. But at 64, they might have a different opinion. So we're all looking for something. That's the point. Now, in terms of where we find ourselves now, yes, we find ourselves now as a point of continuation from previous. So what all we are now is the sum total accumulation of all our experiences. And the system says that death is a comma, not a full stop. So we simply carry on. And if you think it's carrying on from the human life, not much more than that. But in this Viveka Shudamani, at the very beginning, this is very highlighted. We are called fools, basically, if we don't, having attained this rare human body through the whole process of change and evolution, the whole process of accumulation of learning experiences from the amoeba to where we are now, and then the advantage, social advantage that we seem to have. And then if we have the advantage of the capacity, at least, to advance our understanding and to inquire into the nature of things, and to not be content with the status quo, but to look for the deeper things, progressively even. Basically, if we don't do that, it's kind of a waste of human life. And equivalent to suicide, according to Shankaracharya. So, but those people, we are fortunate in as much as we are looking at things from the individual progressive point of view. Fortunately, we are given the understanding in Vedanta that we can shift our position and answer the question from a different point of view. That all of this is a divine manifestation with an urge to unfold. And we can leave that inner urge that religion calls God to do it. We don't have to create a headache over it. So as long as our spiritual direction is intensifying to the point where the world has become smaller and God is becoming bigger, I think that's all we need to worry about. You see, the temptation will be, I wish I was content like them. I'm suffering, and actually, I'm on a spiritual path. They seem to be fine. They're not spiritual. Then what's the difference? See? Well, at some point or other, nature has a way of probing us deeply and creating sorrow. The biggest sorrow we have, and the biggest fear we have, is the fear of death. This question of immortality, mortality is there, looming before us all. And those people who seem to be like the swan, gliding along the surface, are probably paddling desperately under the water. Anyway, at some point or other, two swans gliding along contentedly, one swan at least will suffer when the other swan dies. And that's a fact. So what is in the way? In the way is our ignorance about things. What is the antidote? Knowledge.
It's great. Thanks, Swami.
Good. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.